Okay, so welcome to Friday, September 25th, I think, 2015, and today what we are going to do is we are going to talk about the long essay. Okay, you guys are going to have to write your long essay, and it's going to be due Monday. You will have the prompt right here, okay, shortly, and I'll put it up there, and then I will also put it on the list for the sub, and then he can write it on the board. He or she can write it on the board for you, and then you're going to go to the computer lab and start writing it, and you might be able to finish it, because a long essay is very, very simple, way easier than a DBQ could ever be. So what a long essay is essentially a DBQ without documents. So it's just an essay like you would write normally. You have to include facts, you have to have a thesis, all that other stuff that you have to do in a DBQ, except this time, no documents. So there's no cheat sheet. So you either know it or you don't. Now the College Board is going to give you roughly 35 minutes to write it, which shows me that they obviously know that it is fairly simple. So what I want you to do right now is we're going to go through the rubric. So I want you to pull the rubric out, okay, and I'll give you some time to pull that out. But go ahead and get that out. And while we're waiting, I drew a blank on what I was going to say. So since you should about have it out by now, let's go ahead and go over this. So the long essay only makes up, I think, 15% of your grade. So it's really not as important as a DBQ, multiple choice, or short answers or anything like that. But if you look at the first thing that you have to do, the way that it differs if you look at both sides of the rubric and back and forth, is the way that it differs is mainly in this section right here. Well, this is hard. Right here, okay? What this section is you have various skills that you need to master. So we're going to write one of each of these essays throughout the semester. The year long is probably going to write two of each, but you guys are going to write one of each so that you can practice it. But follow along while we're going through this, because we're going to start with the thesis. Okay, so the thesis, you can see the difference between the DBQ and the long essay. Immediately the thesis is 1 point versus 2 points. So you only get 1 point for writing a decent thesis. That answers all part of the question. And again, it is going to be at the end of the intro. And what are you going to do to it? Good, you are going to underline it. Excellent. Okay, so you're going to underline it so that I can see where it is, so the reader can see where it is, and that's something that you are now going to do every time you write a thesis statement, including the DBQ. But again, where does it go in the introduction? Excellent, at the end. If you didn't say the end, we have a lot more work to do than I thought. Okay, so the next section is going to be the targeted skill. This is the skills that they want you to master before you write your essay. When you leave APUS, this is what they want you to master. So if you look at the first one, is comparison. Each of these are worth 1 to 2 points. Essentially, every single skill that you have, comparison, causation, continuity, change over time, and periodization, every single skill that you have, is, if you describe it, you get 1 point. So if you just answer the question and you describe, you write a very basic essay, you're going to get 1 point. If you do a synthesis and you develop a specific examples that justify your thesis or argument, well, and you have a thesis, you're looking at 4 points, and that's your goal. Remember, your goal on this is 4 out of 6, where on the DBQ it's 5 out of 7. So it's very simple to get these points, though. All right, and that's what we're really going through. So if you look at comparison, obviously, if you get a comparison essay, you describe similarities and differences of whatever the topic might be. So, for example, if the topic is, let's say, Chesapeake and New England colonies, well, you have to describe the similarities and the differences in that, and you would get 1 point. If you elaborate and you talk about the reasons for the differences between the Chesapeake and New England, talking about the founding, religious freedom, not just describing it, but analyzing it and going into expansive detail, you would get 2 points there. You should do that anyway. You guys normally do that very well, so I'm not really too worried about you guys doing that, I mean, the difference between describe and explain, describe is just very basic, tier 1 stuff, right here. You guys need to explain to get down to here and really make sure that you're analyzing why things are happening, okay, what the differences are, not just explaining them and saying, hey, here's how they're different. Why are they different also? So that is comparison. That is very, very simple. You'll see your prompt here. You basically have to figure out what the prompt is asking you. You basically go through the same writing steps that you would normally, even on a DBQ. Read the question, figure out what it's asking you to do, throw up on the paper, remember background information, create categories, write the thesis, and go. Okay, so it's very simple. The next skill is causation. Okay, so these are causes and effects. So we have similarities, which is very easy, and then we have causation, which is cause and effect. All right, again, simple. The cause is this, the effects are this. What are the causes and effects of the War of 1812? Very simple, okay? And they will probably say, I have a bunch of questions that they redesigned and that was emailed to me. They will basically, a question will say, for example, evaluate the causes and consequences of growing opposition to slavery from the United States from 1776 to 1856. All you have to do is put the causes and effects. Okay, it's not hard. That's very simple. And again, if you read the question, it should say to you that it's a cause and effect question. Same thing with comparison, compare and contrast. Okay, and causation, causes and consequences. Okay, so that's how they would disguise it. But again, once you read it, you'll know if it's asking you similarities or differences. Now the difference, the tough one is going to be these two down here. Okay, periodization and continuity and change over time. So let's look at continuity and change over time. That's the one listed number 3. Okay, what I want you to write down underneath continuity and change over time is I want you to write down evaluate the extent. Anytime you see evaluate the extent, they are probably asking you a continuity and change over time essay. That is very, very important to understand, because if you can understand that, then you will not get confused between a periodization and a continuity and change over time. Also, a continuity and change over time will give you a time period. For example, 1700 to 1800, 1700 to 1750, 1750 to 1800. They're going to give you a time period and ask you a topic like, how does immigration change from 1860 to 1900? And you're going to have to describe the continuities, how it stays the same, and the change in it. So last year, one of the essays that I thought was going to be on it was describe immigration in the United States from 1890 to 1930. And there's a lot of continuity, but there's also a ton of change. So that was a very good one. Okay, so evaluate the extent. Anytime you see that, boom, automatically continuity and change over time. Lastly, periodization. Periodization is very simple. They're going to give you a topic. Let's say slavery. Okay, they're going to give you a topic and they're going to say up to 1860, slavery was starting to die out. Right? Let's just say they said slavery is starting to die out. Is it support, modify, or refute? And you're going to have to basically tell how things were, that it wasn't dying out, and then after a specific time period, let's say if they said 1860, if it was dying out in general. Okay, so that's going to be really the big things. Oh, edit this out. I need to edit this out. From 8 minutes to 9 minutes. Periodization, the fourth one. So the difference between periodization and continuity and change over time is a lot of times you're going to see how is this a turning point in American history, and you're going to have to explain how things were, then the time period, the part of history, and then how it changed afterwards. So that's what periodization is. You'll also see it in an essay that might be Reconstruction as a turning point, refute, modify, or support this, and you're going to have to tell how things were before, what it is, what Reconstruction is, and then how things were afterwards, to basically discuss how it was a turning point. Now, in all four of these, you need to make sure that you include a thesis statement that includes a direct answer to the question, and also develops categories, because a lot of times you won't see categories on these. I'll probably give you one today to make it easy for you, but you need to make sure that you sorry, Coach Gus walked by. Squirrel. You need to make sure that you include that in your thesis. Okay. Last two things is up here in the upper right hand corner, use of arguments. Okay. This is background knowledge. These are specific examples that are going to give you your full credit and help you prove your thesis. Okay, now if you look, address the topic of question with specific examples of relevant evidence. So if you're just laying out background information, really not explaining it, you're only going to get 1 point. But if you use examples of evidence to fully and effectively support your thesis, okay, and if you look at the scoring note, to fully effectively achieve the stated thesis or relevant argument, responses must include a broad range of evidence. So basically, I want you to use at least 3 pieces of background, specific background, and explain how they relate to your thesis statement in each paragraph. 3 pieces of background information and how they relate to each paragraph. That is going to give you a 2 points for argument and using your development. So if you have a good thesis, and let's say you just describe the point, you have 2, and then you do a great job using background and analyzing how and why things happen through your specific evidence, you are going to get 2 points. So now you're at 4, and you've done it. And then if you just throw in your synthesis at the end, you have now written a long essay. So remember, synthesis goes in the conclusion. So make sure before you start writing that you do the steps that we've been talking about. Step 1, read the question, figure out what skill you're going to have to answer. 2, throw up on the paper. That's your background information. When you throw up on the paper, you might want to write how and why it matters. If you think it's going to take too much time, just throw background information, don't worry about anything else. And then 3rd, develop categories and write your thesis statement. Okay? That is how you are going to write a long essay. Good luck. Have fun. I miss all of you down here in Louisiana, and I will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend.